The sea was quiet, almost too quiet for Commander Nathan Reeves. Aboard the USS Mason, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer cutting through the Gulf of Aden under moonlight, he stood on the bridge peering into the horizon. The waters shimmered, calm, but tension gripped every sailor on deck. Intelligence had been coming in all day. Something was brewing. For the past 2 weeks, Houthi rebels in Yemen had been ramping up aggression, launching drones and missiles at commercial vessels with increasing boldness. But this time, the chatter intercepted by CENTCOM hinted at something more serious. Ballistic missiles, long-range and potentially deadly, had been moved into position near Al-Hudaydah. The target? Unknown. The intent? Unmistakably hostile. In Combat Information Center below deck, radar technician Petty Officer Jamie Morales sat hunched over her console, eyes locked on a familiar sweep of green lines. She had grown used to the monotony of watching open water. But tonight felt different. She noticed it in the sharpness of Commander Reeves's voice during the briefing, in the way the sailors spoke just a little quieter. At precisely 0227 hours, that silence shattered. "Track acquired. Possible missile launch," Morales called out. Within seconds, the ship's Aegis combat system lit up, tracking a trajectory rising unnaturally fast from the Yemeni coastline. One blip turned into 3. Multiple launches. Speed and arc confirmed it. These weren't drones. They were medium-range ballistic missiles. "Sound general quarters," Commander Reeves ordered, his voice like steel. Klaxons howled through the hull. Red lights blinked across every corridor. Below deck, sailors scrambled to battle stations. On the deck, vertical launch cells hissed open, ready to unleash interceptors if necessary. But this wasn't a drill, this was real. Up in the combat center, Lieutenant Sarah Cohen analyzed the missiles' flight paths. They're heading for international waters, commercial traffic zone, and possibly toward coalition vessels. We've got less than 4 minutes. Commander Reeves nodded once. "Let's end it before it becomes a headline." USS Mason's defensive systems kicked into high gear. 2 SM-6 interceptors launched into the dark sky, their solid-fuel boosters lighting up like comets. A distant boom echoed faintly, and sailors instinctively held their breath. 30 seconds passed. "Impact confirmed," Morales whispered. "One missile destroyed mid-air, working on the others." But one of the ballistic missiles veered, its guidance system suddenly correcting course. It was heading straight toward the USS Mason. Adrenaline surged through every crew member. The destroyer's close-in weapon system spun to life, the 6-barreled Vulcan cannon locking onto the incoming object. At a range of 1.5 miles, the phalanx opened fire. A deafening burst of 20-millimeter rounds sprayed the night sky. Metal clashed against metal mid-air, and then detonation. The shockwave rocked the ship, a tremor that sent a few sailors stumbling. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Cohen confirmed. "Missile destroyed. No damage." On the bridge, Reeves exhaled slowly. That was close. Too close. Aboard the USS Baton, an amphibious assault ship 20 nautical miles away, Rear Admiral Colleen Templer had been monitoring the entire engagement. The data stream from the Mason painted a clear picture. The Houthis had just tried to hit a U.S. Navy vessel with ballistic missiles and had failed, but the intent had been unmistakable. Templer tapped the screen on her tablet and opened a secure line. Task Force 55 is now authorized for immediate counter-response. Confirm targets and prepare a retaliatory strike. I want air assets in the air within 10 minutes. She turned to her operations officer. They want to fire long-range weapons? Fine. We'll show them what real firepower looks like. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, the gears of war were already in motion. A flight of Super Hornets, prepped on the deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, had already begun their engine checks. In-flight refuelers moved into position. Satellites locked onto the GPS coordinates of suspected launch sites. The Houthis had made a bold move. but they had underestimated the speed and precision of the U.S. Navy's response chain. Back on the USS Mason, Commander Reeves stood in the CIC, watching as the final intercepted missiles debris splashed harmlessly into the sea. He turned to Cohen. "Let's make sure Command knows we're still standing." She smiled faintly. "Already done. CENTCOM has the full data." He gave a curt nod, then added under his breath, "Let's see how the world reacts to this one." What had begun as a tense night patrol was now the opening act of a high-stakes international confrontation. The missiles hadn't caused damage, but the message was clear. And soon, the reply would come, not in words, but in roaring jet engines and precision-guided fury. The flight deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower pulsed with urgency as ground crews scrambled beneath the roar of spinning jet turbines. Moments earlier, the call had come in. Hostile ballistic missiles had targeted a U.S. Navy destroyer. Though all threats were neutralized, the act itself was a declaration. Retaliation wasn't just inevitable, it was already airborne. Lieutenant Commander Adam Sloan climbed the ladder into his FA-18F Super Hornet, helmet clutched under one arm, checklist already running through his mind. Call sign Razor 2-1, he had flown sorties over Iraq, Syria, and the Red Sea. But this mission was different. This was personal. The Houthis had just tried to kill his shipmates. Now, he would return the favor, with precision. As Sloan secured his harness and canopy, his weapons systems officer, Lieutenant Mike Haskins, spoke over the intercom. "Target grid confirmed. Mobile launcher site near Saada. Secondary, radar installations along the coast. Orders are to disable, not escalate." "Copy that," Sloan said. "Let's send them a warning they won't forget." The Super Hornet taxied into position, catapulted down the deck, and soared into the pale morning sky. Following close behind were 3 more fighters, all part of a coordinated response to one of the boldest provocations the Houthis had yet attempted. Meanwhile, deep inside the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, General Eliza Markham observed the operation's digital layout as it unfolded in real time. She had served decades in both combat and policy, and she recognized what this moment could spiral into, if not handled with exacting force. The president had approved limited strikes. No civilian targets, no extended campaign. Just a clear message. The U.S. Navy is not to be trifled with. She turned to her advisor, Colonel Reynolds. "If this doesn't stop them, we escalate next tier, but we keep it sharp and surgical today." Reynolds nodded. "The intel shows their launcher crews are still mobile. If we don't hit now, they'll disappear again." "They'll try," she replied, "but we'll be watching, always." At 0832 hours, Razor 2-1 crested the Yemeni coastline, flying low and fast to avoid early radar detection. The terrain below shifted from rocky hills to the ragged outcrop of the coastal plain, where satellite imagery had confirmed the Houthi mobile launchers were last spotted. Sloan activated the targeting pod and acquired the objective, 2 flatbed trucks with scissor launch platforms nestled near an abandoned warehouse. "Target in sight. Designating now." "Locked," Hash confirmed. "Weapons hot." 2 laser-guided bombs dropped from the Super Hornet's belly, streaking toward the target with deadly elegance. Seconds later, dual explosions sent fireballs into the air. The launchers, now smoldering wreckage, would never fire again. But that was just Phase 1. From 30,000 feet, another squadron released electronic jammers and decoys as they approached the coastal radar array. These installations were the eyes and ears of the Houthi defense network, and blinding them was the next priority. Anti-radiation missiles screamed from under their wings, homing in on hostile emissions. When the first radar site was destroyed, a chain reaction of silence followed. Coastal defense operators went blind. Back on the USS Mason, the mood had shifted. The earlier tension was now replaced by a grim sense of satisfaction. Morales kept monitoring for any retaliatory signals, but the skies remained clean, for now. Commander Reeves watched the data feed from the Eisenhower strike group and allowed himself a rare moment of pride. "They didn't hesitate," he said quietly. "No, sir," Cohen replied. "They knew exactly what to do." But even as missiles struck their targets and radar domes collapsed in flames, questions lingered in classified back channels. Where had the Houthis gotten the capability for a coordinated ballistic missile strike at sea? Who was supplying them, training them, giving them intelligence? No one believed this was purely homegrown anymore. Back in Washington, General Markham had those same concerns. She leaned over her secure comms terminal and sent a message to the Defense Intelligence Agency. "Investigate SIGINT intercepts for foreign coordination. Focus, Iranian involvement. Full spectrum analysis." Because deep down, everyone knew this might only be the beginning. In the sky over Yemen, Sloan's Super Hornet began the return journey, banking westward over the glinting Red Sea. He could see the burning craters left behind from their strikes. The job had been clean, professional, but he knew this wasn't victory. This was deterrence, the kind that worked only if the enemy believed you'd go further next time. "Hash," he said into the comms. "You think they'll get the message?" Hash hesitated. "They got it. Question is, who else was listening?" And somewhere deep in the shadows, someone was. The briefing room aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower was dimly lit, tension hanging in the air like smoke. Lieutenant Commander Adam Sloan sat at the head of the table with a folder open in front of him. His Super Hornet had returned safely, but he wasn't done. The after-action report detailed everything from weapon trajectories to satellite verification of confirmed kills. But something gnawed at him, something about the precision of the Houthi missile launch that hadn't felt random. Lieutenant Mike Hash Haskins entered, coffee in hand, and dropped into the chair beside him. "They're saying the target acquisition was too good to be homegrown. This wasn't trial and error tech. They had help." Sloan nodded. "We hit them hard. Took out their launchers, radar, and 2 of their mobile communication nodes. But they launched from 3 locations, not 1. That kind of coordination, that's external." Across the globe, intelligence analysts combed through signal intercepts, satellite feeds, and dark web chatter. A pattern was emerging. Iranian operatives, suspected Hezbollah liaisons, even digital traces linking equipment to North Korea. Nothing definitive, but enough to raise alarms in every Pentagon war room. This wasn't about one strike anymore. It was about escalation. Back in the Arabian Sea, the Eisenhower carrier strike group adjusted course subtly, a show of strength angled toward deterrence. Every deck crew member understood they were now in a new phase, not post-conflict, but prelude to the next. Captain Dana Westfield addressed her bridge officers with calm precision. "From this moment forward, assume we're being watched. Every radar ping, every takeoff, every maneuver is a signal. We are not here to threaten. We are here to ensure that threat never comes to us first. Understood?" "Aye, Captain," they responded in unison. Meanwhile, deep inside the USS Mason's Combat Information Center, Ensign Talia Morales studied a scrolling feed of intercepted comms. Most were encrypted, some were gibberish, but one stood out. A brief exchange in Farsi, distorted and fragmentary, mentioning Bait al-Faqih, a coastal town recently under surveillance. More troubling was the phrase she translated as "next test." Her stomach dropped. She flagged the message immediately, sending it up the chain to CENTCOM, and then leaned back, processing what that could mean. "They're not done," she whispered to herself. In Washington, General Eliza Markham stood before the National Security Council. The images were on screen: missile craters, charred radar stations, the tactical map showing U.S. air superiority. But her eyes were on the intelligence overlays. "We delivered a precise proportional response," she said. "But this wasn't just a one-off. This was an operational rehearsal. They wanted to know how fast we react, how tightly we coordinate. That means one thing. They're preparing for a larger, more synchronized confrontation." The president leaned forward. Options? Markham didn't hesitate. Increase patrols in the Red Sea, bolster signals intelligence, and authorize limited pursuit missions against Houthi launch cells still operating in remote regions. The room fell quiet. It wasn't war, not yet, but the line had thinned. Back aboard the Eisenhower, Sloan stood outside on the flight deck, helmet tucked under his arm, the sea breeze pressing against his flight suit. He watched the horizon, dotted with shadows that could be ships or waves or threats still unseen. Beside him, Hash leaned against the safety railing. "You think they're gearing up for another round?" Hash asked. "I think they want to see if we blink," Sloan said. "And we won't. Not this crew. Not this ship." Silence stretched between them as a pair of F-35s screamed overhead, heading east on a new patrol vector. Hash sipped from his coffee. "Crazy thing is, some people back home will never hear about this. They won't know how close it got." "That's the job," Sloan replied. "Do it so no one has to worry." But the quiet was deceiving. Beyond that endless sea lay warlords, militias, rogue nations, and invisible lines drawn in digital code. What had started as a ballistic missile launch had become a global chess move. And every player was watching how America answered. A coded message crackled through Sloan's communication, a new recon flight, a new sector to cover. He looked out at the burning horizon, the sun melting into waves, and nodded to Hash. Time to go back up. Because peace, in this part of the world, was only held by those willing to fly into the fire.